Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we assemble to explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, 1 minute at a time. In this, our 6th season, we are looking at the Avengers. I'm Andy Nelson from the Next Reel Film Podcast.
And I'm Pete Wright, and what do you think I would need to do to get on a threat poll?
I don't think you want to know, but...
Start climbing.
Today we are talking about minute 70, which begins with Tony wondering why it's suddenly all about him, perhaps for the first time, and ends with not a team, but a chemical mixture. Back on the show, it's Kyle Olson. Hello, Kyle.
I would have words with thee. The Thor quote, by the way.
This is that point in this conversation where everything is getting really heated and everybody is talking over each other. I mean, even in the script, it's got the several lines of dialogue all being spoken next to each other at the same time. So it's great to see how this plays out and how these lines come. Just quick note, one of my favorite lines when Tony throws out to Steve, they're talking about this, Natasha mentions there's a list where S.H.I.E.L.D. is monitoring potential threats. And Tony says to Steve, "You're on that list? Are you above or below angry bees?"
One of the best. But equally right after that, when you hear him in the background yelling, "Verbal threat, I feel threatened."
You're right.
It's pitch perfect.
Well, I think Tony's probably been in a fair amount of HR meetings.
Yeah, right.
Yes,
right.
For sure. For sure. This is that Pete Tignataro, like camera moving, swinging around chaos dialogue that somehow still manages to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
This is where we're getting our inclination that there's something more going on here too, because as you can see, like as we've seen, it's been very traditional in terms of like one shot, two shot, just back and forth, and now we've gone full steady cam.
Yeah.
As we drift in and out of people, and it's also getting a little bit twisty and turny too, so it's not just like a straight up West Wing walk and talk, sort of going around. It's like started, and then finally at the end, then we get the big move, and we got to kind of go, oh right, that's what's going on.
Yeah,
and so I do want to talk about that. Well, let's talk about that now, I guess. The Mind Stone, I'm assuming what we're saying. We don't know it's the Mind Stone, of course. It's just the scepter. But we do know.
Did they know?
Well, I think they must have, because it's, they've already been plotting for the Infinity Saga. And so I'm assuming that they did. My question, though, is in the context of the story, it was the scepter. It was the tool that Loki uses to control people's minds. We've seen him doing that several times in the film. And so I guess our assumption is, it's the scepter. They control minds with it, and there's a mind thing happening here. Does it make sense that this thing is doing this to all of these people? Does it seem like it's doing it by itself? Are we meant to think that somehow Loki is controlling it and making it do this? Like, how do you read what's happening?
My impression had always been that it's Loki doing this. That I don't think that he knows that it's the Mind Stone, because I don't think Thanos would trust him enough to give him an Infinity Stone. He says, "No, I have a Mind Staff for you."
Yeah.
Because obviously he has one of the most valuable things in the universe. He's just given it to Loki.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
like you don't tell Loki what it is you have, because and Loki, we see, doesn't really use it. Kind of how it can be used. He has to do the tappy thing. But I think he knows that there are other powers to it as well. And I think part of it is just like him just putting out waves of paranoia, of fear, of, it's like and I think it's the proximity of it too. Like he's just down the hall. And so he's still like, concentrating and doing that. I almost kind of wish they would like cut to a shot of him in the cell, just like sitting. And then you could kind of go, but then maybe that's too obvious.
Well, I feel like it's maybe not obvious enough, because I do think there is a read on this scene where you could kind of see them having just escalated themselves. Like there's something else going on in the scepter, but it's not impacting them. They're just human, or I should say human and Thor. Yeah. And they are just exuding their own natural fear, anxiety, and anger with each other and escalating. Meanwhile, we do that incredible inverse shot to indicate that we're transitioning now from bickering humans to some other bit of malfeasance to come. And so I don't know. Like I honestly, from view to view, I go back and forth. I'm sort of leaning at this point toward maybe we're just messy and not being controlled.
Yeah.
I think there is an element to that. And, whether Loki is controlling them or not, you have to imagine that the way that the plan that Loki and Clint had put together was, I will let myself get captured. You will steal the iridium. You'll take that to Eric and you'll get to where you need to go. We need to release the Hulk, and we need to kind of get the team involved in all of this. So I will let myself get captured, and they will get the scepter. And whether I have it or not, and maybe the filmmakers left it loose because they're like, we don't think it really matters. Whether Loki ends up having it or not, it is a tool that somehow ends up kind of playing with their minds and pushing them into a place where they lead into this very contentious conversation here as they're all arguing with one another and pushing to a place where, things are going to be getting worse. While at the same time, Loki and Clint know that this is something that we are able to track because of the gamma that it puts off. We're going to be tracking it as our tool to find where you are, Loki, and we'll come up there and we'll get you and the staff and get everything set off as far as taking down the Avengers, what we need to do. So I don't know. I guess that's kind of my sense of all of it. Like, I don't know how much it matters, but I do think there is some messiness in the construction. It does kind of bug me, but at the same time, I just end up walking away like, well, I guess whether Loki's doing it or the Mind Stone's doing it, one way or another, they're not powerful enough to fight off whatever it is that thing's doing.
Yeah, I think it's very clear that there is something going on. Not only that thing, but like in the next minute,
definitely.
There's something that's
minute
very,
sure.
very clear. And then I think in minute 73, which I unfortunately will not be here for, there's something that's very obvious that just shows there's something weird going on.
Yeah,
beyond just them getting angry with each other.
Yeah, the whole thing is very interesting to kind of see how it plays out, and it is frustrating because there are points where I wish that they found ways to kind of be a little more clear about the Mind Stone elements of it at this point without making it blue, things like that. But, I know it's always a challenge putting these sorts of stories together, and they had to come up with some way to kind of say, oh, the Tesseract and this scepter, there's a connection between them, and the Tesseract, if you use the scepter in one place and the Tesseract in the other, there's a way that they can communicate. We can open up this portal so Loki can get here. Like, they needed to come up with something. And so by making it blue, it just seemed like there's this natural connection between them that made all of that probably, from a writer's perspective, much easier to just kind of write off, as it were.
Yeah. And speaking of writing, this is some of the best that Thor has been written. Thor has a couple of great lines that, like, this is like I would say, was not terribly well written for in his first two movies. But here I think he has a really good line for let's see. I thought humans were more evolved than this, and then you treat your champions with such mistrust. It's like, well, that's really good. That's really good.
As somebody who talked a lot about the Thor film over that season, I say I really liked the way that he was written more in that film than in this film. I feel, this scene's fine. Like those lines that you point out specifically, I think are great lines. But and we talked about this back when Thor and Loki were having their conversation in the forest. That scene just felt like they were trying too hard to come up with lines that felt more grand and Shakespearean than they had.
When you look at that and then you look at Get Help and you kind of go,
yeah,
the same
I
guys,
just don't think
same guys. They've done it the same amount of time. Like
exactly. But to your point here, I do like his lines through this whole thing. I like what he's saying here. Pete, what do you think? How does Thor play for you here?
Well, I'm fine. I really think Thor is great, and I actually I'm sort of on. I think I'm probably between you guys on Thor's treatment and just his straight up dialogue. Here, it's great, and then it kind of it kind of crumbles when we get to the latest Thor movie, and so we're easing toward what I think is kind of peak comedic Thor. I think this is on target for kind of my Thor. I don't think the first Thor movie was really my Thor. The next Thor movie is not my Thor. Ragnarok is more my Thor. I really enjoy that sense of humor and what they give to this. They sort of lean into the absurdity. So, and then that next movie kind of falls apart. This is the Thor that I want when he is with the Avengers.
Yeah.
And I think they nailed that part for me. So I don't know that I didn't necessarily. I don't think I didn't like the original Thor, but we're easing into them in my view, figuring out who the hell Thor is in movies, right? That makes him interesting and believable.
It is interesting, though, and I do wonder if there's an element to the realization that Marvel audiences really do enjoy the comedic takes on characters, as opposed to like the DC audiences who seem to enjoy the much more darker versions of their characters. But over the course of these, of kind of the next few films, you definitely watch, and we just talked about this with Hulk. Hulk definitely moves from kind of this scarier version that we have in this film to kind of, he starts going a little more funny, and it's, they play into that. Same thing with Thor. Like, they're really going to be playing into kind of the comedic sides of a lot of the characters over the course of the franchise. And I do wonder if there's something that we kind of lose by kind of pushing everybody to kind of that comedic bent that they're all seeming to have.
That's true. I think part of it is as you've seen in all these different franchises, you guys who have studied people from series, is that the longer a person plays the role, the more the role becomes what they're like.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
It's like it sort of evolves to become like more what the individual actor is as opposed to what the character was. And I think Thor is the one that changes the most over the course of it, because I feel coming out of the gate, Robert Downey Jr. had a really strong take on
Iron Man,
Iron Man on Tony, like as just basically like this is what he wanted to do. Which was pretty kind of off center from where Tony had been written in the comics, where he was always like more charming playboy, like, hey, how's it going, like a very George Clooney sort of like, and this one playing this sort of this manic energy kind of thing was very Robert Downey Jr. Now the comic book version sounds like Robert Downey Jr., where I feel like in the Thor, like over the course of things, Chris Hemsworth was probably the greenest of all of the people in this room. And really, really, when I did Road to Infinity, where I was watching all of these in anticipation of Infinity War, I watched them all like once a week. Essentially, it was a Marvel movie, a movie a week. Seeing the evolution of Chris Hemsworth talent is pretty astounding when you watch these. He is really green in Thor, and by the time you get to where he's at in Thor Ragnarok, I'm like, you have seen an amazing transformation where he understands the game, gets it, and then becomes a master of it. It's pretty astounding.
Well, and I would add, just interesting that to your point, the Limitless documentary series that he does with
Disney Plus,
National Geographic. It's on Disney Plus, but I think it's National Geographic.
Yeah, it's on Disney Plus. Right, and that is essentially Thor doing his health regimen. Right, like it's like Chris Hemsworth figured out Thor, and you know what kind of Thor figured out Chris Hemsworth?
Yeah, I do like him, and he doesn't get as much to say as like Steve and Tony in this bickering bit, but he is great, and you're right. Like Chris Hemsworth definitely gets the opportunity to kind of continue exploring this and really finding a way to own it by the time we get to Thor Ragnarok.
Yeah, but I still agree with you, Pete. By the time we get to Thor: Love and Thunder, it's like, okay,
it's too much, too much
over the top.
Now we need to pull back.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right, what else in this conversation do we want to talk about? Because everybody's pretty much bickering here. Captain America's on the threat list. Everybody's kind of fighting. Fury's concerned.
Well, we need to talk about the most important Avenger, of course. Hawkeye.
Well, okay. Well, I just wanted to see if there's anything else in this conversation first. But yeah, we do cut to, this is right after this fantastic camera move where the camera it's on a jib arm and it just goes up and over the scepter, coming over and putting everybody on their heads. And it's just an incredible.
It's almost like the world's turned upside down.
Almost as if. And what's interesting in this next cut that we get to, I'm assuming, I don't know where Clint got a quinjet, but apparently he did.
Well,
and
they were at a base.
We cut to, they cut to the screen inside. And
wait, sorry, is that what you want them to do your what if episode about?
Right.
Like
where
Marvel
did
calls
he
up
get
and they'll be like he only gets to do one. You're like, I want to do the episode where Hawkeye attacks a small shield base and steals a quinjet.
Steals a quinjet.
And you know who's guarding it? Another shield agent.
That's right. No, my what I do think is
We're
funny.
just gonna get it washed. It's like Stripes. Like they're just gonna. However, I've just convinced myself now. I do want to write that episode.
Yeah, you totally should. Yeah, I do love the cut though because we're upside down
of the scepter, and then you get the scepter on the sensor.
The scepter on screen.
Yeah.
But why is the scepter on their screen upside down too?
Because it has to match the jib shot, Andy. Duh.
Is it?
It's upside down.
I thought when I watched it, I thought it wasn't, and it really bothered me. I was like, oh, I wish it would have been upside down.
No. It's absolutely, it strikes me every time how well planned that graphic is.
It is designed exactly for the audience so that we see
match cut.
We're seeing the scepter upside down and we cut to the screen and it's showing the scepter positioned exactly as we were just looking at it. But yeah, why is there image of it upside down? I have no idea. It's one of those irritants that's purely designed for cinematic purposes because we do want that fantastic match cut.
But Andy, who defines right side up, upside down? It's just a construct. Sides and ups and downs.
You know, the globe could have America on the bottom, man, and it would be just as valid in the universe.
It's all because of your neo-Western perspective.
That's right. Now we are in this Quinjet. We're seeing these pilots flying up, and this is very much a typical moment where you have a plane arriving or a vehicle of some sort arriving, and you have the conversation between the people inside and the people outside. The intercom voice is wondering about why transport 6650. They're trying to get their information, and although it's much easier than in things like Star Wars, the pilot just says arms to ammunition, and they're like, okay, then you're good to go.
Oh, bullets! Great, come on board.
I guess you knew where we were,
but I was about
so
to
we'll let you come in. But this is also a moment, Kyle, your take on the cloaking, because we do get a sense of how the cloaking, I guess what we're meant to read is mainly from this particular shot. This is the one that really kind of gives us a sense as to what we're supposed to be seeing it as, where when you're directly underneath, it's completely invisible. As you come up to its height, suddenly it's now visible. So the invisibility, the cloaking only works if you're below it, I guess, is what we're supposed to read.
Yes. In which case, you'd be in its gigantic shadow.
Yeah.
Right? Because the sun would shine down, and it's still blocking it.
See it.
Like, that's how light works.
It's the heliclips.
Yeah. It's like this is a really terrible, terrible stealth method.
What if a plane is flying by? They're going to see, why?
Also, there are satellites that look down that could see it exactly where it is because it's not cloaked on top.
All right.
It doesn't make any sense at all.
It's very frustrating.
But maybe they're running in whisper mode. I mean, they're giant fans. You could hear that.
You just connected Blue Thunder to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I am here for it. Jaffo.
Oh, but to your point, Kyle, we do cut inside. We see a bunch of people getting ready for battle, including Clint Barton with his magical blue eyes.
Yes. Are we supposed to recognize these people?
No.
Okay.
They are people, we do hear in a deleted scene that they got all these people. Like, I didn't know this many people were, out to get S.H.I.E.L.D. because we're like, why do they have all these people?
Okay.
But they're just people who don't like S.H.I.E.L.D. is the way that the deleted scene kind of paints them all. Shields enemies. But yes, Hawkeye. We have a little bit of him here. When we were talking Thor, I can't remember what minutes you had. It wasn't anything involving the hamster cage and Clint's appearance there.
No,
so this is really your first opportunity to talk about Jeremy Renner as Clint Barton. What do you think?
Not a fan.
Really?
Yeah, not a fan. Well, okay, so nothing against Jeremy Renner. Obviously, at the time of recording, Jeremy Renner is fine. He was injured. He is fully recovered, or he's in recovery, I should say. He's doing okay. So, like, nothing I say that's not as nice to him. My problem isn't with Jeremy Renner. My problem is with this is not Hawkeye. And so I'm representing my friend Kim here, who this is the hill she will die on. I don't know who this guy is, but this is not Hawkeye, because Hawkeye is very, very, very different. The only thing that's the same between them is they both shoot arrows.
Okay, so how is he different? Sell that perspective.
Hawkeye is a loudmouth. He is like Oliver Queen. He is in Cap's face all the time. He is like, you're a fascist. You're a tool of the machine. He is anti-establishment. He is intense. He shoots his mouth off all the time. He also runs off half-cocked all the time. He is a terrible planner. He gets himself in trouble all the time. He is terrible at relationships. Basically he can never get it together. He's, when they do in the comic series with Matt Fraction, he's basically Jim Rockford. Like, he's just constantly getting knocked down. Like, because he really is the guy with arrows running around with space gods. He has no reason he should be there. He has an extremely strong personality where he is like, will not let anything go if he thinks that someone is being exploited or is out of line. He will get up in the face of anyone and yell him down if he thinks that they're out of line. And like, this guy is taciturn and serious and quiet and like a loving family man and like completely different than Hawkeye. Now, don't worry, fans, I'm coming back around to this. He is similar to the character that he was in the Ultimates. He's much more like that Hawkeye.
Which is where they got a lot of these characters from.
But that Hawkeye was a jerk. That guy was awful, and also got his family entirely slaughtered. So if that's what we're following, then that farmhouse is going to be bathed in blood before we've seen the end of Hawkeye. So hopefully that's not the case. That guy was a dick too. Not as big Hawkeye of a dick as Ultimate Captain America, but that's another story. But yeah, that's my main problem. Is every time I see him, I'm like, that's just not Hawkeye. And even the whole series, which I enjoyed, they're playing the beats of the Matt Fraction story with a person with a different personality and history. And that's why that series doesn't quite work. It's good, but it doesn't quite work because the personality is what drove that story. And it's a different person doing it. This very stoic, serious kind of thing. And I also feel bad for Jeremy Renner in that it's his first time playing this outside of the one scene in Thor. And he has to play it mind controlled the whole time.
I know. It's so frustrating.
So nothing against Jeremy Renner. It's more against Tig. This is my biggest complaint of this movie is Hawkeye.
That's interesting.
I like Hawkeye too, and it's frustrating this take on him that we end up getting here, and it's kind of a drag that this is the direction that they go. I'm less a fan than your friend, obviously, but I don't end up having as much a problem. Like once he is out of the mind control space, I'm a lot better with him. Like I love Jeremy Renner. I think he's. Yeah.
I agree, and I think they found a way to use him in the battle, which was brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm
happy with that.
And over the course of the franchise, we still get that in here, but it is frustrating.
Well, it's really frustrating because I'm a fan of the new Hawkeye run, the purple Hawkeye run, right? And I really like it. And I realize as we're talking about this that I guess I'm frustrated by the whole thing too, but I've been so much more frustrated by the crappy treatment of making him under mind control for the most of the duration of this movie that I haven't ever really reflected on the actual adaptation of the original character. I totally see that. I can see how that's frustrating for the Uber fans.
That's the thing. Is it's sort of like there are characters like this that you could bring in and do this. There are characters with this sort of like serious, if you want to have the military soldiery kind of, super spy kind of stuff. There are characters you can bring in and do this with. It always drives me crazy in all these movies when they take a character and completely change their personality, but give them the same name and the same powers and stuff too, because they're gonna do it again, and and it's gonna drive me crazy then too. When we do Guardians of the Galaxy 2, it drives me just as crazy. But it's like it's the same kind of thing.
Widow,
it's like, why are you changing them so much? Like,
they'll
use a different character or make someone up.
Right. You've got plenty of space to do that. So
exactly. Like, I mean, the thing with all these things, there are slight variations and stuff too, and that's fine. Like, I don't have a problem with anybody else on this roster. Like, even though they're slightly different, that's fine. It's for me, Hawkeye is the complete different. He's just a completely different person.
Well, here's a question for you. Since you have read the comics, you have a lot of knowledge from various histories as far as who's been on the team. But if you could have your pick of Avengers, as far as like making your own Avengers team, who would you have on it?
For like at this point?
If you were to say, I would love to see this group as the Avengers.
Wait, so like if I got a chance to write the Avengers comic now, or do you mean if I was doing this movie? Because there's different.
Either way, I mean, however you want to interpret it.
I don't want to monopolize the entire episode of just talking about my fan roster. So I just want to get our parameters down before I start.
Yeah.
I have not thought about this, so this will be all off the top of my head.
Well, let's start with the films.
Okay, all right. So, I mean, the films you kind of want to have. There's a lot of good people out there who are not great in terms of like cinematically. There are interesting personalities, but not really great in there. Like that's why I feel like Hawkeye was a weird choice, because it's really hard to portray an archer when you've got vibranium shields flying around and lightning coming from the sky.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, I guess if we're sticking with like people who have been Avengers or off the thing, now what has become their new holy trinity, I think you have a Thor, even though there's been several of them, and then a Captain America and a Iron Man type. But it'd be interesting to sort of like shake up some of those things to have like Beta Ray Bill or someone who's like a little bit even more alien. So you still have a Thor, so you still have that level thing, but then someone who's like looks alien and feels alien, but still has the God of Thunder sort of powers. So for your Captain America, I mean, straight up Steve is fine, but I would really go Captain Carter. Because Captain Carter is, like that we've seen the multiversal thing. She got to have one kind of nice moment, and then to sort of, if you go,
don't get me started on that movie too.
Yeah, exactly. We're going fully multiversal. And to have, I mean, and then just pretty much straight up, just Tony Stark, Iron Man. Like, I mean, it's sort of like as the sort of the stalwart, just sort of like, I don't really quite know either of you. To sort of have that, you have already them at odds,
sure.
Have that sort of trust. But I really, one of my favorite things is sort of the Hawkeye thing of like, I like a person who is a little bit out of place too. So, I mean, I really like having Hawkeye with Mockingbird. Mockingbird is a person they used a little bit in S.H.I.E.L.D., but never really got her due, and now probably never will. So they kind of burn that card, but she was a great foil because she was also a super spy, also highly trained, and could do a lot of stuff, but much more competent. So she was a little bit more like what Natasha is here, except that you could trust her. Like she was not as duplicitous. Like having them as sort of your regular people doing that. And then for heavy hitters, I guess I would probably bring in Ben Grimm, the Thing. Like, why does it have to be the Hulk? Like, you have a guy who's just a regular. He's a mensch. Like, he's a solid dude. Like, he's just a good guy to have around. You can trust him. Like, he's always going to show up. He's always going to be there. Like,
but he's not without his interpersonal demons either. Like, he's not without his grief.
Exactly. Yeah, but his interpersonal demons, he keeps them internally.
Yeah, exactly.
He doesn't take his rage out on the rest of the world.
Like every good stone should. Right.
So I think that's a good squad, I think, right there.
Yeah.
Oh, I think so. I think so, absolutely. I love it. I think, we've had some interesting responses to that. One of my favorites is still the inclusion of Blade with Kid Thing on his back.
Yeah.
It's a man thing, it's Kid Thing. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
I think Jason Aaron is, you could tell he was just having the blast writing those comics. You know what? Why not Blade? Sure.
Yeah, exactly. Very funny. Very funny.
I mean, I love his version of Ghost Rider was fantastic. Like the idea that you take it from just like, oh, it's a guy with a car. Like, no, he's the rider. He can ride anything.
Anything.
Yeah.
It's like, oh boy, but he get into that.
He piloted a Celestial.
That's right. He ghost rode a Celestial.
Yeah.
Come on. Like, he was just cackling with delight when he was writing that.
Oh, no kidding.
Also, I have met Jason Aaron. He is as solid and awesome of a dude as you would like. He's a great guy. So if you ever get a chance to meet him at a con, he looks like a bouncer at a biker bar, but he is one of the nicest people I've ever had a chance to go up and gush over.
Oh, that's cool.
Awesome. Well, I think let's wrap it up for today with Minute 70. We'll be back tomorrow to talk about... No, we'll be back next week to talk about Minute 71. So, Kyle, tell everybody about where they can track down what you're up to out there on the interwebs.
Sure. You can check out the Curiosity Codex. It is currently on hiatus. However, there's some good stuff there. I got to talk to filmmaker Mandy Fabian about her film Jess Plus None, which just had its world premiere in jolly old London, and apparently had a great response. So I'm hoping to get to talk to her about that soon. So that means we'll be coming back in there. But in the meantime, there's like 15 episodes or whatever where she goes into complete detail about what it takes to actually make an independent film and do it during COVID. So it's quite a tale.
Spoiler, it's hard.
Yeah, and so it's coming to the end of that story now too. So hopefully we'll get to put a final chapter on the end of it. But in the meantime, you can check it out. Good stuff.
Yep. Awesome. We'll have the link in the show notes. Everybody check that show out. It's a good one. And that's it for today. We'll be back for Minute 71. So, Pete, thanks as always.
Next week, Andy, arms to ammunition.
Until next time, true believers.
Enough said.
Marvel Movie Minute is a production of True Story FM, engineering by Andy Nelson. This season's music is Message to the World by Anthony Vega, and this season's show art is by Winston Yabo. Find the show at truestory.fm. If your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, please consider doing that for our show.